hello and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Charlie Osmond. I'm the Chief Tees at TripTees, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Rob from Best Western. So actually, maybe Rob, first of all, I should just let you introduce yourself, say what your role is, and equally how you came to be at Best Western.
Well, hi everyone, thanks for joining. So yeah, as Charlie said, I'm Rob from Best Western, the CEO here. I've been here for 2 years, just over 2 years, and the crisis we're going through now is something that has tested every bit of patience and resolve that I've had over the last 2-3 weeks. So it's been a challenging few weeks. And yeah, I've come from a revenue management background and loving life at Best Western.
Okay, and before we jump in and I ask you more questions about what is going on, I have to do a few bits of admin. So the first one is there on the right-hand side in the panel, there's a place where you can submit questions. Really, I think this time, we know that from a lot of you who are joining the webinar today, one of the reasons is you just want to hear how other hoteliers are dealing with challenges and what other people are experiencing. So as well as questions, if you'd like to add little comments about, well, here's what you've been doing, or here's what's worked for you, then please do, and we'll try and share them in the webinar. But we will be referring back to the questions during the chat. Also, there will be a recording of this made that will be sent out tomorrow, so you can look out for that. And if you have any feedback, particularly on the content we're bringing out at this time, things you'd like to hear more detail about, please email content@triptees.com. And that's it. Without further ado, let's jump in. So Rob, can you tell us just a little bit more about Best Western so that everyone's on the same page? Sort of number of hotels, where they are in the world.
Yeah, so all over the world actually. So about 4,500 hotels worldwide. We've got brands from the luxury end. So in the last 18 months, World Hotels has become a Best Western or BWH Hotel Group brand. So from the luxury right through to economy and apart hotels and boutique markets. So we're covering 17 different brands. Here in the UK, we've got about 282 hotels, but quickly growing at the moment, which has been good until recent times. And we're covering about 8 brands here in the UK. Okay,
and so with that global footprint, I'm guessing that you've been involved in thinking about coronavirus for a while. Can you talk us a little through about how it started impacting the hotels, and where you're at today in terms of response?
Yeah, so my responsibility is in the UK. The impact was a bit slower to hit us, to be honest, because we are not as exposed to airports and prime sort of big city centre hotels. We've got more peripheral, more leisure base. So it's been quite amazing how quickly it's on set. The first week of March, we were still looking at, in our actuals, we were still looking at small growth year on year. And then all of a sudden, towards the end of that first week of March, we could see our forward bookings were really starting to tail off. And our forward pace was taking a hit, and it quickly escalated. Within about 2 weeks. We were well, the lights are turning off here, sorry. Within about 2 weeks, we were down to
they really are. Well, yeah, just about.
We were down to 80% down year on year, so it ramped up so quickly and just hit us so fast. It was we were totally unprepared for how quickly it was going to come.
And so and when that massive or sudden change hit, like, what were your first thoughts? What was going through your head as sort of the leader of this business? And yeah, what did you do? What were the first steps?
Yeah, we had a board meeting the first week of March, and we were sort of modeling, what if we had a 20% decline? What if we had a 30% decline? What if we had a 40% decline? And none of us modeled what if we have a 100% decline. So, and I'm sure right around the country, right around the globe, nobody was expecting it to be this sort of shutdown. So, yeah. So we were planning for, what we need to do from a cost management point of view and our marketing approach and things like that, but just not to the level that it happened. So that was probably what caught us by surprise.
Yeah, and actually, and that is mirrors exactly what happened with us. Obviously, when hotels do well, we do well. When hotels are suffering, so we had what felt like very quick reaction when we saw challenges coming. We did the same. We modeled, okay, so we're going to be down quite a lot for a certain amount of time, and we made a bunch of decisions as a business about, okay, well, what does that mean? How do you cut back and hold back? And then it felt like only a week later, the world had changed again, and it suddenly had become clear this isn't short time, it isn't 50%, it could be 80, 90% for 3 to 6 months. So in terms of how that creates communication challenges, I guess, for a leadership management team. How were you communicating with the team as this was unfolding?
Yeah, so we had a line of communication. We've got several stakeholders. We have our board and our owners, the hotel owners. We had our staff, and we had our customers as well. So we're trying to manage sort of 3 key stakeholders. What we immediately started to do was to reach out at a government level and understand what the planning was at that level, as well as not just in our own organisation. So, of course, your first action when revenues massively drop off is to make sure you mitigate your costs, like any business. So we started to look at that side of things, but really quickly looking to understand how we could protect our staff, because as it escalated, it was clear that we were going to be this was a really serious situation. So that understanding from the UK government of what we were expecting from a staff relief package and how we could protect everyone who works in our organisation was our number one priority. Of course, we have to manage cost mitigation, but we wanted to look after our team. So that was the first thing that was on our minds.
Right. So does that mean, so were you, because I've personally found it quite impressive how quickly governments around the world, I mean, there's a lot of criticism and whatever, but some of the rescue packages, some of the amount of money that's been committed, some of the systems that they're like dreaming up in a week's time and then putting out, it's quite extraordinary how fast it's moved in some respects. But at the same time, when you're running a business, you want to be able to make decisions even quicker. So how were you having to balance, well, should we make a decision about closing these hotels, or do we wait for government information and news about whether there'll be support packages? Has it been a challenge, like balancing that, not quite yet knowing what the government's going to do and having to make decisions, or do you wait? How have you dealt with that uncertainty?
We've tried to take the government guidance as much as possible, but you're right, we had to go with, I'm just going to walk around the building and turn some lights on because it's motion censored. So bear with me 1 second. There we go, look at that. Okay, so yeah, we tried to follow the government guidance as much as we could, but also look to other regions who had already gone before us. So we could see what was happening in Germany, and we could see what was happening in Spain, and what rescue packages had been issued. Is that better?
Yeah.
So we had a bit of an idea of what was coming, and then our internal communications through the government, through hospitality bodies and government contacts, we had an idea of what was coming even before it was announced. So we're trying to plan around that as much as we can, but our immediate concern shifted towards how are we going to keep the team together and make sure we keep business continuity and not run out of cash like every business around the world's trying to work out right now.
And equally, because you mentioned some of the stakeholders, and you have individual owners of properties who also are spending all day, every day reading and trying to make a quick judgment about what to do and what the best thing to do is. How did you manage? Can you talk a bit through like that challenge? Because you must have some owners who want to do this and go this way, and others who hear this information and want to go that way. I can't even begin to think how you keep that together. Can you talk a bit about?
Yeah, so Best Western's a membership organisation as it stands today, and what's been incredible to watch over the last 2 to 3 weeks is just how quickly that organisation came together and wanted to support each other. So it makes our job quite easy actually, because what happens is there's a camaraderie that I've not seen before in any other company amongst the hotel owners and managers. And all we did was facilitate the communication lines for that. So we set up a WhatsApp group to start with. It was one of the things we did, and that's been very, very well subscribed to. And via that WhatsApp group, what that gave me was a direct line of communication to the hotels, and them a direct line of communication to us as a senior team in York as well. And that open flow of communication has been critical through the last 3 weeks. Without that, in real-time conversation. I think there's a few things that would have could have escalated and got out of hand, but we're able to manage really as a collective really well. The Seaballs loan's a great example. So the relief package that the government announced for short-term cash, a lot of our hotels need that in order to pay their bills, pay their staff, to exist as a business. And what we were able to do through the WhatsApp group and through our communication channels was to mobilize that voice really quickly at scale. So we put up a template, a letter that we asked each hotel and each owner to sign and issue to their local MP. We took a survey, and we had just over 100 respondents, so we could say, right, this is how many loans have been applied for, this is how many have been offered on commercial terms, this is how many have been offered on Seaballs. Mind you, it was 1% offered on Seaballs, 99% declined. And we passed that to the Treasury, and that was 2 days ago. And then in the morning yesterday, we had a call, and they said, you're going to hear something in the next 2 days about this. And then last night, we heard in the Prime Minister's address, it was dealt with. It wasn't just us, but there were other industries. But that mobilization and that speed at which we could connect as a group and work is getting action. Today, we're dealing with insurance because we know insurance is the next big issue. So we're trying to put together a collective approach with media, with UK hospitality, through aggregated data, but the only way we can mobilize that is really through those quick communication channels. So as crazy as it sounds, WhatsApp has been a huge help for us.
No, that's fabulous. And I guess that's because it's likely the best channel you've got to have fast communications with that specific audience who maybe aren't connected using internal tools that you might be using for the rest of your team, but that's the right way. Or are you using WhatsApp for your internal team as well during this time when they're like furloughed, or is this WhatsApp for the owners? And
the WhatsApp group was initially set up for owners. We've got WhatsApp groups set up for our internal teams as well, and we're using Microsoft Teams as well. So yeah.
Right. Wow, that is, and actually, it's and forgive the background noise I have here. I'm in a hotel, and it's my kids are having to do online lessons this week, so they've got the hotel room, so I am outside. Hence the occasional bird tweets. We're desperately trying to get back to New York, and we're in this quarantine from the UK because it's 14 days we have to wait until we can fly into New York. So we've had to be outside the UK, waiting in a hotel for 14 days, hopefully providing some good business for this hotel that otherwise is quite quiet. But just hence the slightly odd surrounding noise. Forgive that. So one of the things that has been really impressive watching Best Western and you and your team in the last few weeks has been that you instantly took control and sort of the narrative and the conversation. And for those people watching this who aren't in the UK, you may not have known, but something that happened really early on was Best Western being talked about in the press as a hotel company that was going to help carers. And that happened so fast. It felt like other hotels were just beginning to think, gosh, should we furlough or what should we do? And you guys were out there with this new initiative. So can you talk a bit about that? I'm guessing that also relates to you had this communication channel set up and you just decided to start hammering through things. Can you talk a bit about the initiative and what that was about and how it came about? Because it just happened so quickly.
Yeah, we have internal PR. We have a borderline genius guy called Andrew Denton who works for us, and nobody write that name down. Don't contact him. Don't try to poach him.
He's no good. He's no good.
And he messaged me. He texted me on a Sunday morning, and it was the morning that on the Andrew Marr show, which is a famous show here in the UK, on Sunday morning, he was speaking with the health secretary. And Matt Hancock had said, they said, how are you going to deal with this? You don't have the capacity in the NHS. And he said, well, we know hotels are empty, so we'll contact them. So within minutes of that happening, we were able to contact the Press Association and say, right, we've got 16,500 rooms, we're ready to support. And because of the scale and because we hit that as that story broke, and as Matt Hancock was literally within minutes of Matt Hancock saying that on national television, every press agency and press outlet in the UK picked it up and ran the story. So we're on the front foot. We own the narrative right from the start. But what that did is it put our brand in the driver's seat for further communications. And from that Sunday morning, I mean, it's incredible what happened right up until this day. Still to go today, we had a bunch of companies reached out, and there's several strands, and we formed an NGO. And now that NGO is the prime partner within the NHS for discharge patients. So we put together a model. We've got ground logistics with a company that put their hand up and said we want to be part of it. We've got about 6,000 volunteers who came together with an organised company and said we want to be a part of it. Deliveroo came to us and said that they will give free meals to every NHS hosting hospital, 3 meals a day. From that, it escalated. We had a development fund come along and lead the whole thing. So we ended up with sort of 5 or 6 organisations, and we formed an NGO, and we've got a clinical team of some of the best clinicians in the entire country, driving the clinical side of it. And it's very complex to turn a hotel into a hospital.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to think about clinical waste. You've got to think about the legal implications. You've got to think of what the banks might think from a lending point of view. You've got to think about medical supply storage. You've got to think about backup generators, because if your power goes down and somebody's on ventilation, are you liable for a death? So there's so much to think about. And in the space of that article, that interview happening on the Sunday morning to now, we are now putting hotels live with discharge patients. So it's been an absolute pleasure to be a part of. Hasn't been much sleep over the last 2 weeks, but that has absolutely put us on the front foot, and it's put a lot of our hoteliers are open today and operating because we've got NHS and because we've got this model available. So it's been it was a genius stroke from Andrew.
Wow, yeah, gosh, and interesting, and led in a sense from PR first, driving then this recognition and opportunity to identify this new segment. But and it must also be like really inspiring for everyone in the business to feel through these tough times, which are very challenging. And there must be a lot of people in the business who are, I guess, on furlough, who are worried about their jobs, but feel, well, I'm glad I'm to be part of an organisation that's having an impact.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of it's tough, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. It's so difficult to stand in front of your team and say, guys, we've got no work for you. And we had to have that conversation here. And it was one of the most emotional days of my entire career, I'd have to say. And the room that day was very humbling, was just full of support. And everyone just wanted to get behind and support this whole initiative and make sure that we come out the other side with a company in good strength, and all our families and friends still with us. You know, that was the primary focus of the whole day. So watching not just our hoteliers, but the team here in York come together, and you know, there was a few tears shed that day. So it was a really emotional day, but incredibly powerful to watch a team come together and say, we're going to beat this.
And in a moment, I'm going to come to some questions because we've got a few coming through, but I just wanted to close off and make sure it's completely clear exactly what you're doing to support the carers. So right now, there's a certain proportion of your hotels where they're dedicated and specifically only taking in people who work for the National Health Service or people who are involved in helping the relief effort. And those, I guess, those are people who are they're likely to be when you make a decision about one of the properties that's going to transfer into being a hotel or looking after people, how long a period have you had to put aside, say, okay, this hotel will be dedicated in that way for this issue?
Yeah, on most of the situations we've got so far, it's down to 3 groups. You've got rough sleepers or people who've got no other alternative abode. That's been a big group that we've been able to support. We've got actual carers, so staff who need to isolate from their family because their kid might have a cough or something like that, and they need to protect the NHS staff. And then we've got the discharge patients, and it's the discharge patients that we've really focused on because that's the most complex and difficult one to deal with. And those bookings are coming through. Yesterday I had a number of them. Most of them are for 3 months. Some of them are for a bit longer. And they take most of them will take the hotel exclusively. because they can't mix and have other customers in there. So they're quite long bookings, and you know, the hoteliers are. It's what we're trying to work out is, you know, we obviously can't run at a loss, but what we're trying to do is set the pricing where we can cover the business to operate. So be really sensible with the pricing to support as much as we possibly can the NHS. But be in a position, if we're not going to have furloughed staff and we're going to be operating the hotel, of course, we need to be able to cover the costs.
And how does that work for your staff? I assume there must be some of your staff who feel this is great, I want to help. If we can help and I can be part of that, that's excellent. And I equally imagine there must be some of your staff who are nervous that they might come into contact with coronavirus. They then have their own families that they worry about, or their own health to worry about. Have staff just had to have the ability to make a decision, do I want to work in this new circumstance or not?
Yeah, well, each hotel is owned individually and they'll make their decision sort of locally whether they want to take it or not. And that has been a concern for some people. So we need to make sure our protocols are right to protect our staff. But there's been cases where people have said, look, it's not for me, and that's okay as well. So we've got we've got about 6,000 volunteers sat behind it. So where we need to support a hotel with staff, we've got this volunteer group that we're able to parachute in and support. We haven't had to do that as yet, so let's see how we go. But definitely that's been a concern amongst some hotel employees, and I completely understand that.
Yeah. Okay. One of the questions, and thank you for this, whoever's posted it. When's the right time to reopen? When a raise in demand is clear, or as soon as possible, even if that means making a loss in the first few months? How are you thinking about reopening other properties?
I think it has to be in line with demand, because the reality is this situation has depleted almost every hotel owner as cash reserves. So they won't exist if they open. There's no money to lose. So I think it has to be driven by demand, and I'm pretty confident. I want to remain optimistic that when the travel ban is lifted, I think even if it's domestically first, I think most people are going to want to get out and get active again. I think the corporate market's going to be a slow comeback, but I'm really confident and optimistic that things will come back fairly quickly. So when the bans are lifted, when the lockdowns are lifted, we're going to see a good bounce back for hotels.
But how do you? I mean, practically, I assume there's a challenge of you don't want to say these dates are available, book my hotel in May, if you're not sure you can deliver against that. But equally, if you don't say these rooms are available, you won't know if there's demand. How do you balance that, assessing the demand and actually saying, yeah, okay, then we'll open?
Well, the approach that we've taken at the moment is that the lockdown is being stated as at least 2 months. So we're sort of looking at it and saying, unless it's key workers or people have no alternative abode, we're not going to take business into April and May, but we'll take a view on June onwards. So it's got to be there, and you've got to take that demand. And perhaps when we get to June, you know, hopefully the lockdown is lifted. If it's not, then we'll have to deal with those bookings. But the reality is the traffic on our website and the bookings happening on our website, even though we're open, are next to nil. Nobody really wants to make a lot of bookings at this point. There's still dribs and drabs, but most of the business at the moment is key workers.
Yeah. So and can you talk a bit then about if you know, business is down and there's not a lot going on? Obviously, I imagine you have some staff who you've put in furlough and who you bring back when there's demand. For those people who are working, what's your advice, or what are you trying to do to use this sort of downtime?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. We've just started to turn our attention to what we do now for the next few months, and I think there's quite a lot that you've really got to sit back and say. And I think the first thing that we did was say, well, how do we want our business to come out of this, and how do we want to be seen when we come out of this? And we wrote down where we were on that front. So we want to be seen as compassionate, empathetic, we care, all those sort of things. So then you start to build around, what do we need to do during this time in order to achieve that? So, you know, we've got multiple stakeholders. We want to make sure our customers think that we're compassionate and empathetic. We've got a story that we're trying to manage through the press. But we've also got staff that we want to make sure that we keep in touch with, and we have a strategy around our staff as well, around making sure we have regular contact and keep everyone feeling engaged and motivated. And then we've got our owners as well. So I think we've got to look at all those stakeholders, and I think each hotel can take that as well, is to look at all your stakeholders and think about how you want to be viewed on the way out of this, because that's going to be really important for the bounce back. And I think the second thing we've started to look at is all those jobs that you put off, you know, for so long, that you say, well, you know, I'll do a SWOT analysis another time. You know, it's now's the time to sit down, do a SWOT analysis, really look at your surroundings and say, well, you know what, maybe there's something that's opened up close by, a new attraction, whatever it might be, that you could have a package for. Maybe your comp set needs to change. Maybe your product offering needs to change. I think a lot of people are going to need to think about product coming back, because everyone's become very accustomed with video conferencing and Microsoft Teams and Zoom or whatever it might be, that we can expect meetings and events to be a slightly different landscape when we come back. So what do you do with your space? Do you turn it into co-working space? Do you turn it into bedrooms? I think now's the time to have all those conversations and thoughts, because you've got the space and the time and the clarity to do it.
Yeah, actually, that's just yesterday. I was talking to one of the managers of one of our businesses in a different market, and he was saying, you know, everyone is working from home very successfully right now. I'm not sure if we need an office in the future, but it is important to get people together. And I said, well, you know, given we work with hotels, can we find a friendly hotel who's near our current office and say, can we have a business, you know, a meeting room for a day every other week, where basically everyone goes in, and if the Wi-Fi works well, everyone can work together for one day every couple of weeks, and we pay for that, and that's a much cheaper way of having an office. So yeah, I agree. There are new segments that are about to be invented, or that are in the process of opening up, and it's about being close on those. Okay, so that's really good advice. Think about all the jobs that we're not doing or we haven't got around to. And I know that one of the things you've done in previous roles is major overhauls of technology and systems. So as you think about, you know, hotel, whether it's distribution systems or internal systems that perhaps no one ever has time to get around to, are there any, you know, projects in that line that you've been working on or you think might be a good time to make changes to?
I think particularly in the distribution landscape, there's been a lot of talk in our WhatsApp group, and we're going to start talking about it amongst our leadership team and the board, is when we come out of this, it's kind of the reset button's been hit in the distribution landscape. And you know, how do we want the world to look when we come out? We've probably got a chance to shape that to some degree, and not completely change it, but we can shape it to some degree. And I think, you know, how we work with our online distribution partners going forward, what we want to put across to, or we want to give away at this moment, because we're all coming from a standing start, we've probably got an opportunity to think about that. So I don't know what we're going to do yet. We haven't made a decision, but or made any concrete moves. But we're certainly having those discussions about, you know, do we need to be on as many channels as we have been in the past? How do we want to price these channels? And how much do we want to give up to these channels? Because we're all coming from a standing start, and perhaps there's an opportunity to reset here. So I think that's one area.
That's one actually, and that chime resonates with the last webinar we ran in the US with Calvin Anderson, who was of distribution revenue director of Red Lion Hotels, and then Oyo in the US. And I guess, yeah, his view was very much there's been slow progress and evolution of, say, distribution relationships and partnerships, and a crisis like this is when those things accelerate, and it's an opportunity. Basically, this is an opportunity where everything's up in the air, and it's an opportunity to recast slightly the relationships you have with distribution partners, suppliers, because, you know, as I say, everything's up in the air. And I mean, his main tip on that, because he's a big believer in meta search, was that hotels used to focus a lot on getting OTAs not to bid on their keywords on SEO. And he's like, this is the time where you need to push OTAs not to be bidding against your meta search, because that's low funnel. You're going to get those guests. They're bidding on your name. That's the kind of clause that he would want to now use this as an opportunity to change. But I guess everyone might have different specific things. The key point is it's a moment in time. It's a little unique where you can recast the relationships going forwards.
Yeah, absolutely.
A few more questions. So during the lockdown, are you sending communications to your database? If so, what type?
Yeah, so last week we did our first trial. This is, I mean, another one of these amazing stories, but we did a trial last week to a small pot of our top members, and we said it's not a sales message. We want to make sure you're okay. It was quite an empathetic message, but the crux of the message was to say, we know a lot of people are isolated and lonely at this moment. If there's somebody that you want us to write a letter to, or handwritten letter and get it delivered to, let us know. Email us back, and Andrew put his personal email address there and said, email me, let me know, and we'll write a letter to them. He then engaged, we got a couple of our leadership team to engage their parent groups at their schools. And we sent to a pot of 5,000, and we had an incredible response to it. People writing in saying, an 82-year-old grandfather wrote in and said he wanted to get a birthday card to his granddaughter, but he couldn't because he's in isolation and he's not allowed to come out. So
Wow.
there was probably within the first day of sending out to a 5,000 audience, there was about 40 to 50 people who had written back and said, could you write a letter to my grandmother, to my aunt, to my granddaughter, whatever it was. So the parent-teacher group then sat down at the parent group from his school, sat down and hand wrote these letters and have delivered those letters throughout the UK. So the response we've had it's 40 or 50 letters across 5,000 emails. So you'd say, well, it's a pretty low response, but the PR that we've gained out of that and the goodwill that we've gained out of that, with people just replying saying, I don't want you to write to anyone, but this is incredible. I think those opportunities and those little nuggets, they exist all throughout everyone's hotels. And I think now's the time to grab them and really engender true loyalty, not just points, but real genuine loyalty.
Yeah, that is amazing. That's a real hospitality, real care, not asking for anything, just giving. That's really special. Okay, great. So next one. What about rates and positioning? Any strategy for reopening and for the next few months and next year? How do you think about rate decisions?
Yeah, this is I'm an absolute believer. Revenue management's my background, so I'm an absolute believer in the whole supply demand thing. And I think we heard a lot leading up to this about people saying, hold your rates, and it's absolutely true. The theory of it is absolutely true. Hold your rate. You're not going to drive more demand by dropping your rate, but market force. If we're revenue management, we're really true to our word. When things are really busy, we lift our rate because we know we've got enough demand to capture it. If you sit and you hold your rate and all your competitors are below you and you sit empty, then it just doesn't make sense. So we can't say we want to capitalize on rate and peak demand, but we're not prepared to follow demand when it goes down. So I think it's really going to depend on demand. I think we're going to have a similar situation to 2008 in the corporate market. So I think we're going to see consolidation where corporate travel comes back and says, I've got 6 or 7 hotels in my program in this particular city. I'm going to consolidate down to 4 or 5, and they're going to want us to sharpen our pencil. So I think the rate is going to be going to take a bit of deterioration, both in the corporate market and until the public market bounces back. But I think I'm confident that oh gosh, the lights have gone out again.
Well, while you do that, I'll give you my experience of rates as a hotel customer in the last couple of weeks. Because so what I'm staying in a place where there's 4 hotels within 400 meters of each other, and we knew we need to stay here because we need to be near the airport so we can get back to the US. But the flying over here, actually, I took a flight from the UK, and it was the first time I've ever been in an aeroplane where the entire economy class section of the airplane got upgraded 2 sections to business. Everyone, we were all sitting in economy, and they moved us all forwards because they were like, well, the whole plane's empty. There's only 10 of you in economy. Like, let's just all sit in the front and enjoy, this rather empty ride together. And actually, what I found from the hotels here is that some hotels have, I guess the first thing is I could tell they had to get over the fact that I was actually a different segment. I'm not here because I want to be here. I'm not here because I'm a regular guest. I'm here because I have to be here waiting. This is a purchase I'm forced to make while I wait to go back to the US. And so they have to think about, okay, this is a different segment and I need to price it in a different way to the way I'm thinking. I think some hotels got that and others didn't. I was like, look, I need at least 11 to 12 days of staying. And actually, in a sense, the one that we stayed at is the one where they gave us a good price on a regular room, but then they just said, well, look, all our rooms are empty, so you can have a really good upgrade. And the upgrade doesn't cost anything, but it meant they were, it provided extra value to the guests. So I guess a little bit like that airplane example. Anyway, I gave you a moment to turn your lights back on. I have a couple more questions. How are you dealing with cancellations and complaints? And tied to that, somebody asking how to deal with, Booking and Expedia automatically allowing cancellations. So any thoughts on cancellations and complaints?
Yeah, it's a tricky topic. Of course, we saw Booking.com come out and say that hotels have to refund, and I think there's going to be a lot of legal cases ensuing on the back of that. So I suspect there'll be a class action against Booking.com for that move, and whether it's successful or not, I think they probably are going to have a lot of troubles, and they probably are going to face a financial penalty for that, because it's not their money to give away, and I don't think they're in that position to do that. What we've done in Best Western, because it's all individually owned businesses, so they come and put the badge on the front door, but we don't own any of the hotels. So our position has been, we've encouraged our hotels strongly to move the booking within a 12-month window, or to refund, and many have taken that approach. But as their bank accounts have run dry, they're not in a position now to refund. So they're trying to move as much as they possibly can. And there are little spot fires that take off every now and again on business, where the hotel's saying, I can't refund, and the customer's saying, well, I can't come. So on a prepaid rate. So yeah, there's been little spot fires along the way, and we've had to manage those in isolation. But in general, we've been able to move bookings. That's been the preferred approach. It's not consistent with a business like Best Western, where it's we've got 180 owners.
Yeah, that must be a real challenge, because I imagine different owners wanting to take these things in different ways. And equally, when it comes to, you mentioned their prepaid rates. So as part of the future rate strategy, are you still having prepaid rates, or is that something that you kind of know for the time being people aren't likely to book? So, or everything's fully cancelable? Have you changed policies around future rates?
Yeah, so the discussion we're having at the moment is around introducing a semi-flexible rate. So I think when the market does come back, people are going to be less likely, especially if you've been burnt through this process, to book in a fully prepaid rate. So we might see a bit of a shift here. There might be an opportunity to look at your premiums around your flexible rates and drive a slightly higher premium out of your flexible rate. And there could be an opportunity to have a mid-tier semi-flexible rate, and that's certainly something that we're looking at the moment. So I think there's opportunity everywhere, and you've just got to really anticipate what the likely behavior is, and then try to build your strategy around that. So and semi-flexible is absolutely one that I think has got real merit.
Okay, more questions coming in. Thank you everyone for these, by the way. Hello, thanks for a great and interesting webinar. Oh, that's good. Could you please detail the measures taken to help owners? So what are you doing? You've touched on it a little bit, to help these independent owners survive, reducing fees or providing advice. What else helps the owners?
So there's been sort of two big focuses for us on the owner side of things. Is one, we've completely wiped all our fees, so we're not charging any fees for the next 3 months to our owners. That's been passed on.
Amazing.
The second one is that the top line, so whatever we can possibly do, and this sort of feeds into the whole NHS, our media approach, is that we wanted to get on the front foot and own that media space. That if immediately, clearly over the next 3 months, the only business going to be there is government-led or emergency worker-led. So to get on the front foot and be at the coal face of that and support as many of our hotels to be able to stay open was our second priority. I guess you could throw in their communication has been a big one as well, but I think that's a given. I think you have to be listening and communicating as quickly as you possibly can. So, but cost mitigation, revenue, and communication.
So yeah, again, these sound like great specific tactics, but actually the sense I'm getting from this and from what you said earlier is but they're all in subservience to a very clear strategy. And you went, first of all, how do we want to be thought? What do we want to do? How do we want to go through this period? Come out with those key elements, and then these other things have flown from that. So it sounds,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, one of the questions that came out earlier was, I manage marketing for a single motel in Oxfordshire. The management team decided to close it for 2 months. I've cut costs to a minimum, but I feel there's a different way to manage this. What would be the 3 things you'd look at not cutting, for example, channel-wise, and maybe what would be 3 other things you would invest your marketing money on? So where are you investing marketing? Where would you, as a small hotel?
For me, marketing is, and it doesn't really matter, I think, if you're talking about a global scale or an individual hotel scale here, is your marketing's got to be, you've got to look at it in an ROI basis. And the reality is right now, it's very difficult to drive an ROI on tactical marketing. So in terms of spend, we've absolutely wound back a lot of spend, and everything that we're doing now is either PR or brand led. So our focus, you know, the example I gave before, that's one of many little examples, but we're thinking about what people are sitting at home. You've got to perceive how they're feeling and what they're doing, and then try to play into that. And that's all brand led. You're not going to make sales out of this right now. So investing a lot of money is probably not the best approach. So I'd be thinking about brand and how you want to position yourself, because the real value of that is when you come out. So number one thing would be think about your brand. Sorry, go, Charlie, you were going to say something then?
No, that's a really interesting point of view in particular, because the first webinar and conversation we had when the crisis hit, we were in Asia. We had our direct booking summit, it was due to be run in Thailand, and then Thailand was kind of on lockdown, but we still went and we ran a little event. And the number one key bit of advice that came out of that was the exact opposite. So I'm going to give it to you because it's really interesting, or not give it. So I'm going to play the other side of the argument. And this was in Thailand, where I think actually over the last sort of 10-15 years they've had quite a lot of disasters. And the overriding view was, you can't, as you say, you can't generate demand right now. People aren't going to be booking very much. So don't spend money on brand. Instead, spend money low down the funnel wherever you see real active demand. So there are still pockets of people wanting to make bookings. Make sure you spend money chasing those down. So if you see someone on your hotel website, or you see someone searching for the name of your hotel, or maybe a short-term booking, a low lead time, like they're going to book in the next 24 hours, which means actually they are proper consideration. That's where to spend the marketing budget. So it's an interesting one, brand versus that. It's different opinions. Everyone has to do it their own way.
Yeah, and I guess it also probably comes down to a regional approach as well, because here in the UK, there aren't those little. I understand where they're coming from there. I saw a lot of people saying switch your marketing funds domestic, but there's been there's a government legislation, you're not allowed to travel, so you can spend as much as you like but the only pockets that are available right now are key workers or no alternative abode, and police are turning up to hotels and saying, unless you can demonstrate that, you got a problem. So it is a little bit regionalized, and I understand where they're coming from. That does make sense.
Yeah, no. I mean, that the thing about strategy is different organizations find success in different ways, and you need to have a differentiator. If everyone has the same strategy, that equally won't work, almost by default. Okay, so and one other question was, what do you think? How do you think now? I don't know if you are thinking yet about 2021 prices. Are they going to increase, stay on a level with 2020?
I think the public market, consumer demand, leisure demand will we should be able to resume to a fairly normalized level. I think the corporate market's going to be really difficult, because there are going to be a lot of companies that are completely cash depleted because of this situation. So they're simply not going to have cash reserves. That's going to put them into a position where they need to protect everything that they've got, and discretionary travel will be a big part of that. People will really adopt online meeting tools, perhaps what you're talking about, Charlie, not even having an office. So I think corporate market is going to be a tough one coming back, and we could be in for some price declines there with some consolidation going on and less travel. So I think that's where the pricing impact will be, the corporate market.
Sorry, I'm going on and off mute. So talking about brand for a moment, I don't know to what extent people know this, how much I can talk about it, but I'm going to ask you and we'll see. I know that one of the things that you've been doing in the last few months before the crisis hit was getting involved with I don't know what's the right word, fly on the wall documentary about hotels and hoteliers. So given that you're soon to be a TV celebrity in the UK, can you tell us a bit about that, why you did it and what your expectations are? What is it like to be followed around by a video crew?
You forget, actually. You kind of you kind of come to the point where you get you just go about your daily business. And there was quite a funny story. I remember one day they were filming and I had my microphone on. I forgot I had the microphone on, and one of the other guys was in the car park, and I was driving back from a filming piece, and I was on the phone to Mark, and I forgot I had the thing on. I'm like, hey Mark, this is what we're going to do, and I was explaining what was going to happen. And then I pulled up in the car park, and I was sat in my car just finishing the conversation, and it got to a point, and I said to Mark something. It was slightly controversial, and I said it to him. I said, Mark, you okay? Is everything all right? And if still quiet, Mark, you're right. And I had no idea they were filming. The guy was stood over the back filming the whole thing. And next thing I heard this laughing, and I looked out my window, and I'd been parked next to him for about 10 minutes. He was on the phone in his car. I was on mine. We were literally the two cars next to each other on a phone conversation. So the film crew were watching this, and they saw the whole thing unfold and thought it was hilarious. And Mark finally worked out what was going on. So you kind of forget that the cameras are on, and
Right.
and it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's been fun. It was, for us, it's a branding exercise.
Yeah, right, okay. And were there any moments where you thought, oh God, I wish they hadn't captured this isn't, because I imagine, you know, one of those things that I imagine makes a lot of people be hesitant about doing those is that they might say or do something during the course of the filming that actually they really regret. That isn't just funny for 5 minutes, but actually is something that has a bad outcome. Any moments where you felt, oh gosh, I wish I hadn't said that? Or
there's many, and I'm sure
well,
as we see the 3 episodes, I'm going to sit there and go, God, why did I say that? And I'm sure everyone in it's going to say the same thing. But I think if you don't take that risk and you're not willing to, you know, it's risk and reward. And I think the reward from this is, you know, 3 hours of prime time Channel 4 television in the UK. That's worth millions and millions. So we would never be able to fund that, you know, at a national level. So the opportunity is huge. You've got to be prepared to take the risk.
And you can really get the story, the Best Western brand story, the local owners. You can bring that to the attention of people, which I assume for a lot of UK potential guests just don't know yet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's a great opportunity to tell our story, and we got to put forward the hotels as well. So we chose which ones were filmed and that sort of thing. So it's you know, it's a great opportunity, and we really, the partnership, we did it with a production company that we built a lot of trust with before we actually launched into it. So it's probably 6 months of planning before we actually said, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't want to not have the opportunity to talk about that briefly, but on I just want to come back now. The one last thing. Because I think it's one of the things that's always stood out whenever we've seen you speak at direct booking summits or talk about what you're doing in hotels, is that and I think it's come across really clearly here, right? You're a rather a visionary leader, and I'm sure that inspires people in your organization. But we're going through a really difficult time, particularly independent hotel, you know, a hotel which has had to furlough staff or close down for a couple of months. And I guess that what I really want to know is how do you go about making sure that those staff that are, you know, being furloughed or laid off for a period of time, that you're able to maintain a communication with them? What are the things that you kind of expect to do with the people, or you're advising hotels to do, to keep up a relationship with their employees who for a while, you know, have no work?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, I guess, is the security in the UK with what the government announces has protected everyone's kind of livelihoods. So that's one big element really taken care of by the UK government. But I think the thing you find with Best Western is a lot of them are family businesses, and they've got employees who are incredibly loyal and been there for a long time, and have, you know, stuck through a lot of the you know, tough times, financial crisis, whatever it might be. So I think we're blessed in the sense that we've got very loyal and dedicated employees across the group, because a lot of them are family. which makes it a difference.
Yeah.
But also just making sure that with just little things. We've done something here where we've made sure through the whole thing we've got everyone's birthday through the furlough process, and every day we're writing a handwritten letter to whoever's birthday it is. I think all those personal touches throughout this time are just going to mean they're going to be amplified and mean so much more, and they're so important. So taking the time to make those personal touches, I think, is going to be really important through the next 2 months.
Okay, well, I think that is a beautiful way to bring it to its conclusion, because you've walked us through so many different activities and things that you and the group have been doing. It really is inspiring to hear from someone who's like taking such a proactive set of actions and steps to make the most of a really bad situation, in a sense. So thank you. This has been really great, and I know we've had lots of comments and questions in saying how useful people have found it. I think the last thing remains for me is say, Rob, good luck to you, to Best Western during this time, to all the people you're going to be housing for the good of the nation. Thank you. This was really helpful. And thank you to those of you who've been watching. As I say, there will be a recording going out. If you have any feedback, please email content@triptease.com. Rob, thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you. Stay safe, everyone.